Hello there. Good day. My name is John Mark Anthony B. Dizon, and today I will introduce and present to you my capstone presentation in Asian Studies entitled The Asian Culture: Origin, History, Present, and Future. The culture of Asia encompasses the collective and diverse customs and tradition of art, architecture, lifestyle, music, philosophy, politics, and religion that have been practiced and maintained by the numerous ethnic groups of the continent of Asia since prehistory. Identification of a specific culture of Asia or universal elements among the colossal diversity that has emanated from multiple cultural spheres and three of the four ancient river valley civilization is complicated. However, the continent is commonly divided into six geographic subcontinents or regions that are characterized by perceivable commonalities like culture, religion, language, and relative ethnic racial homogeneity. These regions are Central Asia, East Asia, North Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and West Asia. As the largest, most populous continent and rich in resources, Asia is home to several of the world's oldest civilizations that produced the majority of the great religious systems, the oldest known recorded myths and codices on ethics and morality. However, Asia's enormous size separates the various civilizations by great distances and hostile environments, such as deserts and mountain ranges. Yet, by challenging and overcoming these distances, trade and commerce gradually developed a truly universal pan-Asian character. Interregional trade was the driving and cohesive force by which cultural elements and ideas spread to the various sub-regions via the vast road network and the many sea routes. Today, I will present to you the culture of Asia through geography, culture, and history. Let us start with the geographical divisions of Asia. As you can see, this is the map of Asia. Historians divide history into large and small units in order to make characteristics and changes clear to themselves and to the students. It's important to remember that any historical period is a construction and a simplification. In Asia, because of its huge landmass and multiple diverse cultures, there are several overlapping timelines. Also, for the same reason, different regions have different histories, but they all intersect in myriad ways at different points in history. First, let's jump to the geography of Central and North Asia. Central and North Asia, comprising territories bordered by the Caspian Sea in the west, China in the east, and Afghanistan in the south, which is at times considered part of the Central Asian region. Unfamiliar with the word or term North Asia? There is historical explanation. North Asia is better known as Eurasia, coinciding largely with Siberia, which became a part of Russia in the 17th century. So as you can see, the first image is in Russia or in St. Petersburg, and the second image is in China, which is the Great Wall of China. So what's the territory or what's the geography of West Asia? West Asia, comprising Iraq in ancient times, Mesopotamia, Iran, whose territory previously encompassed Persia, Syria, and the Eastern Mediterranean, today's Cyprus, Lebanon, Israel, Palestine, Gaza Strip, and West Bank, the Arabian Peninsula, comprising Yemen, Oman, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and United Arab Emirates, and Anatolia, and the Caucasus, today's Turkey, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia. So as you can see, these are the infrastructures and buildings in different countries of Asia or West Asia I mentioned. Now let's go to the geography and countries of East Asia. East Asia spanning Mongolia, mainland China, Macau, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Japan, and North and South Korea. This is very distinct because in the first image you can see the Mount Fuji in Japan. The second is the temples of Korea. Now we have the geography and territory of South and Southeast Asia. South and Southeast Asia consisting of the countries that are geographically north of Australia, south of China and Japan, and west of Papua New Guinea. These countries are Malaysia, Cambodia, Indonesia, Philippines, East Timor, Laos, Singapore, Vietnam, Brunei, Burma, and Thailand. South Asia, also known as the Indian subcontinent, comprises the sub-Himalayan countries of Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, India, Bhutan, and Maldives. As you can see in the image in the first picture, it represents or it shows the Singapore. The second image is the Philippines, and the third image is in Thailand. After knowing the geographical divisions of Asian regions and countries, now let's proceed the cultural divisions. A radically different way of looking at Asia's cultural histories is to trace major transcultural phenomena from religious to commercial that spanned multiple periods of geographical regions. And such phenomena are the following. The first is Buddhism. Buddhism, which developed in India in reaction to the established religion, Hinduism, and subsequently spread to other countries in South, Southeast, and East Asia. From the 6th century BCE to the present day, Buddhism shaped various aspects central to these Asian cultures, from principles of government to visual and material culture. So these images are the representations or the symbols of the religion Buddhism. These are the monks, the image or the sculpture of Buddha, and we also have how they meditate and pray, and of course other people or other foreigners who witness their spirituality and religion. Let's now proceed to the second cultural division, which is Islam. Islam, founded by Muhammad in the early 7th century CE at Mecca, modern day, that is in Saudi Arabia. Spread over the centuries in Central and Western Asia all the way to the Pacific nation of Indonesia and reached non-Asian territories in North Africa and the Iberian Peninsula. One can trace the history of the Islamic world and its deep imprint on many Asian cultures and on pan-regional cultural phenomena within Asia and beyond. As you can see, this image represents the Islam, which is one of the famous religion in Asia, together with Buddhism. You can see a man or an Islam man and woman, the symbol of their temples, and of course, how they meditate and reflect for Islam teachings and living. And let's now jump to the third cultural division of Asia, which is the Silk Road. The Silk Road, named as such only in the 19th century, is a network of trade routes harkening back to the 2nd century BCE. And this is the map of the Silk Road. It is connected over the centuries territories from eastern China to southern Europe and North Africa. Although occasioned by trade, especially in silk, these pan-Asian routes had a significant influence on local cultures and enabled cross-cultural encounters. So, because of the Silk Road, trades and connections with and within other countries and societies became easy and comfortable, making the communication and transportation of goods and services from other society or country is easy and possible. And for our last division, we are now going to talk about the history of Asia. In order for us to fully know and understand the culture, where it is going, and where it came from. All right, history of Asia. The history of Asia can be seen as the collective history of several distinct peripheral coastal regions, such as East Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East, linked by the interior mass of the Eurasian steppe. The coastal periphery was the home to some of the world's earliest known civilizations and religions, with each of the three regions developing early civilizations around fertile river valleys. These valleys were fertile because the soil there was rich and could bear many root crops. The civilization in Mesopotamia, India, and China shared many similarities and likely exchanged technologies and ideas such as mathematics and the wheel. Other notions, such as that of writing, likely developed individually in each area. Cities, states, and then empires developed in these lowlands. So we can see that civilization is really came from Asia. And most of the inventions, most of the developments came from first in Asia. Let's start with the prehistoric or before 2500 BCE. The term prehistoric refers to the time before written history. In Asia, as elsewhere, this is the period when the most fundamental aspects of human civilization as we know it are formed and developed. Communities transition from hunting and gathering to taming animals and cultivating land, especially as irrigation is mastered. Prehistoric men and women create complex tools, pottery, and clothing, build homes and monuments, and develop language and rituals expressed through diverse forms of art and eventually through writing. Now, let's take a look to what happened in prehistoric times to the different sub-regions of Asia. First is the West Asia. In Mesopotamia, present-day Iraq, as early as 8000 BCE, sedentary agriculture communities are established by 2500 BCE. Monumental architecture testifies to the development of hierarchies of social and political power. Writing, newly invented, provides invaluable information about the city-states, rulers, and their reigns. Invented by the Sumerians, the cuneiform system is the earliest writing we know. So as you can see in the image, It is the cuneiform, is the earliest writing we understand until today. Inscriptions were impressed onto tablets made of clay, one of the earliest and most ubiquitous mediums for cultural transmission and artistic expression. So, and in the image also represents the buildings and infrastructures in the West Asia during the prehistoric time. Let's jump and talk about the history of East Asia. In China, writing is first seen as inscription on oracle bones and the hallmark of the Shang dynasty. Made of the shoulder blades of oxen or the underbellies of turtles, oracle bones, as their designation indicates, were used for divination, foretelling to the future. Up to that point, China had already developed a rich culture ranging from pottery and clay figurines to carved jade and bronze ritual vessels, the latter of which would have a lasting influence on Chinese art and design. Also, a central motif of Chinese art, the paired dragon and tiger, symbolizing the water and wind in Chinese cosmology, first appears during this period. So, up until today, there is a culture that they need to represent dragon or tiger in every Chinese New Year. They do the dragon dance, and of course, other sculptures and designs that symbolizes these two animals or two creatures, which is the dragon and the tiger. They both represents the water and the wind from their Chinese cosmology. Now, let's proceed to the second phase of the history of Asia, which is the ancient conquest, new empires, new religions, from 2500 BCE to 650 CE. The ancient world is often thought of as a cradle of today's civilization. It is home to important first and to the changes that shape cultural practices and artistic expressions. In Asia and elsewhere, it is a period of military conquest that contributed to the formation of the first great empires, which quickly became cultural hubs, sites of effervescent intellectual, spiritual, and artistic life. So, in ancient times, what happened to Central and West Asia? The first of these empires is that of Cyrus the Great. In the first image, this is the Cyrus the Great, who founded the multi-state Persian Empire in the 6th century BCE and maintained control over a vast territory that grew to encompasses the European Balkans in the west and the Indus Valley in the east. But empires come and go, right? And cultures transform in the process. Much of Cyrus' empire was conquered centuries later by Alexander the Great, which is represents in the second image, who is known to have nurtured great admiration for Cyrus. Alexander's presence in the West and Central Asia in the 3rd century BCE had a lasting impact on visual representation in those regions and beyond. Known as Hellenism, this phenomenon brought characteristics of Greek art, especially its synthesis of naturalism and idealism, to local centers of cultural production where they were emulated and transformed. Next, in ancient time, what happened to South Asia? In ancient region of Gandhara, today's northwest Pakistan, this compelling fusion was at work centuries later in devotional images of Buddhas and Buddhi Satavas or the Bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas is also in the first image, such as one in this presentation. Notice the subtle plump body, the expressiveness of the facial features, and the harmonious geometry of the clothing drapery. But human representations of the Buddha were not always the norm. In fact, in the earliest ancient images of the then new religion, Buddha's presence was indicated by the means of footprints or an empty space under a parasol. Let's now talk about the third phase of history of Asia, which is the Middle Ages, realms and societies. The concept of Middle Ages has been developed in relation to Western cultures to mark a period between Antiquity and Renaissance that presents a degree of consistency not encountered in Asia during the same period. In Middle Ages, as during other timeframes, different Asian regions had considerably different histories. That said, across Asia, this was a time of remarkable developments in communication and science. For example, metal movable type had been invented in China by the 12th century, about 300 years before Gutenberg's movable type of press in Europe. Advances in technology and science, such as the invention of improvement of gunpowder, were put in the service of warfare, which led to the consolidation of the political power of empire. So much of our history are very Western, and it is limited that we know many inventions are really came from Asia, which is needs to uh, presence in the world history. So in this time, Middle Ages, this is also the period where one of the most prominent empire flourished and developed, which is the Mongol Empire, founded by Genghis Khan. So this is Genghis Khan riding his horse, and the second image represents how they conquered other countries and regions. All right. And at its height, the Mongol Empire controlled much of the Eurasia and the Silk Road and saw the transcontinental dissemination of movable type printing and the flourishing of local cultures, all largely due to Mongol patronage. So as you can see, Mongol Empire is really huge and they are so long. Next is the Middle Ages in Central and West Asia. Another major catalyst of cultural artistic activity was the formation of the Islamic Empire in Central and West Asia, starting around 634 CE. It's during this period that the Islamic political structure known as the Caliphate emerges. Typically, a new leader seeking to legitimize political power, the 7th and 8th century caliphs used art and architecture to mark their presence and shape the cultural identity of their expanding territories. The striking example is the Great Mosque. In the image, you can see the pictures of the Great Mosque or Friday Mosque of the Damascus in today's Syria, one of the oldest in the world and larger than any other mosque built before it. Constructed under the patronage of the Umayyad Caliph Al-Walid I, who ruled from 705 to 715, the mosque occupied a site that once housed a temple dedicated to a Syrian god, then a Roman temple dedicated to Jupiter, and later church dedicated to John the Baptist. In Middle Ages, what happened to East Asia? It is in this period that Islam is introduced to parts of China. In fact, this is a time of significant encounters and exchanges. For example, in 607, the first Japanese envoy is received by the Chinese imperial court. This diplomatic relationship opened a channel of cultural dissemination that had a lasting influence on Japanese political thought, literature, and the arts. Shortly after, the Tang dynasty is established in China, leading to a cultural golden age. Tang dynasty poetry is amongst the most extraordinary literary achievements in our world heritage and will become an extremely rich source of subject matter for Chinese and Japanese. So as you can see in the image, this is the paintings of the golden age of China. So what happened in Southeast Asia in Middle Ages? South of China, another remarkable society flourished, that of the Khmers, on the territory of today's Cambodia. The Khmers founded the Hindu-Buddhist Angkor Empire, which grew to vassalize much of the mainland Southeast Asia as well as parts of southern China. So this is the Khmers, the second images, the girls here. The cultural golden age of Khmer's empire datable to the 12th century led to the construction of world one of the most famous, largest religious monuments, which is the Angkor Wat. This is the Angkor Wat, the monuments here in the presentation, occupying over 400 acres of Khmer capital of Angkor, originally dedicated to the Hindu god Vishnu. It gradually became a Buddhist temple as Buddhism was embraced by Khmer rulers, especially King Hajavarman VII, one of the most powerful leaders of the Angkor Empire. Now let's talk about the fourth phase of history of Asia. Early modern self-fashioning and transcultural encounters, 1500 to 1850. As old empires consolidate their power and new rulers and dynasties emerge, this period saw some of the most remarkable expression of self-fashioning, coined by art historian Stephen Greenblatt with respect to the Western Renaissance, in particular 16th century England. Self-fashioning is an apt term to describe cultural processes in Asia around the same period. Self-fashioning was a response to the power struggles of the world, increasingly rich in cultural encounters, ranging from military tensions and diplomatic missions to commercial exchanges along the Silk Road to cultural and scientific collaborations. So, what happened to West Asia during early modern? 1505 marked the beginning of the Safavid rule in Persia. This fascinating history presents generative blend of transculturalism and self-fashioning. Safavids continued to rule for over 2 centuries. At its height, their empire comprised today's Iran, Azerbaijan, Bahrain, Armenia, eastern Georgia, Iraq, Kuwait, Afghanistan, as well as parts of Pakistan, Syria, Turkey, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. As you can see, this is the representation of the Safavid Empire, which also includes the Ottoman Empire and the Mughal Empire. Next is the early modern period in East Asia. In China, the Ming Dynasty, under whose rule the production and global dissemination of blue and white porcelain flourished. So as you can see, this is the blue and white porcelain, which is still relevant today. There are designs, there are utensils, which you can see that which has the presence of the blue and white porcelain colors that defines the culture of China and gave way in 1636 to the Qing dynasty, led by Manchu emperors and ruling over a vast and culturally diverse territory. The Qing dynasty placed strategic emphasis on multiculturalism in a way that the cause of mind similar efforts by the Safavids. And of course, in Japan, the early 17th century marked a turning point of the Tokugawa family took control of the country and began their long and relatively peaceful prosperous shogunate. The Tokuga- Tokugawa ruled from Edo, present-day Tokyo, which gives the name for this period, and where vibrant urban culture developed. So as you can see in the image below is the Tokugawa period in Japan. Right. Now let's proceed to the last phase of history of Asia, which is the modernity after 1850. The 19th century brought a major changes to Asia's many worlds. By the mid-century, societies had undergone watershed transformations in Japan following the 1853 Black Ship Expedition of American Commodore Perry, who demanded Japan's opening to the world's, and the 1868 revolt that put the end of Tokugawa shogunate and restored imperial powers. The arts reflected an unprecedented broadening of styles and foreign influence, as well as imperial ambitions and rising nationalism that culminated during World War II. In China, the fall of Qing dynasty in 1912 marked the end of the country's imperial history that had stretched for over 2,000 years. The rise of the Communist Party, China's participation in the First World War, and the Japanese aggression in Manchuria all led to the country's involvement in the World War II. And the subsequent establishment of the People's Republic led to Mao Zedong, or by Mao Zedong. In response to the centuries' autocratic and colonial rule, communism became a rallying point for revolutionaries in countries across Asia, each drawing on Karl Marx's manifesto as well as the 1918 October Revolution in Russia that had been led by Vladimir Lenin. In short, Japan opened to the world and China introduced the Communist Party or communist type of system in society. So what happened in the Central and North Asia during the modern period? Soviet control altered local cultural and artistic expression to an even greater degree than the pre-revolution Tsarist rule of the so-called Turkestan, comprising present-day Afghanistan, China's Xinjiang province, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Mongolia, Eastern Russia, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. And posters and advertisements from Soviet-controlled Asia show how strong influence of modernist design, function-oriented form, bold compositions on a grid system, and visually striking typefaces, and illustrate how art was used aggressively as a tool for propaganda. As you can see, this is Vladimir Lenin, and these are the posters in that time when the communist or socialism system was introduced to Russia. So what happened during this period in South and Southeast Asia? Well, of course, the near word for this is colonization. Colonization is another phenomenon that has had enormous consequences on the cultures and societies of Asia in the modern period. During the long 19th century, Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam were colonized by France. The so-called Indian subcontinent was under British rule, and today's Indonesia became Dutch colony known as the Dutch East Indies. So as you can see in the image, the first image is France or French in the country of Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam. And the second image is the Great Britain or the British in the countries of Indonesia and others. All right. And from that, however, colonial powers also invested in learning and recording local histories, which is in turn strengthened the identity and self-image of colonized societies, a phenomenon reflected in the consciously non-Western art of some 20th century artists. And lastly, the Philippines, our country. The Spanish colonial period of the Philippines began when explorer Ferdinand Magellan came to the islands in the 1521 to the Philippines and claimed it as a colony for the Spanish Empire. The period lasted until the Philippine Revolution in 1898. So that's the history of the Philippines in this time. And for that, I would like to thank you for listening to my documentation in Asian culture and history. Again, I am John Mark Anthony B. Dizon, and this is my capstone presentation in Asian studies entitled The Asian Culture, Origin, History, Present, and Future. Thank you and goodbye. And may we all be proud to say that we are hashtag proud Asian. Thank you.